Welcome to Season 4 of the Innovation Junkies podcast. In this season, you'll learn from successful innovators who have influential stories, practices, and strategies that will have your gears turning. Prepare to be inspired, challenged, and empowered. This is the Innovation Junkies podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Jeff Ameriine, and I'm here for another episode of the Innovation Junkies podcast. Today we're going to have a very special guest. We've got Gabby Czertok, who's based in Tel Aviv, with us. He is the founder and CEO of The Builders. Gabby's a serial entrepreneur. He's an innovation and technology enthusiast. He's done a number of amazing things in his career, CEO of emerging companies. He's got a legal background from Tel Aviv University. What we're going to talk about today is his experience in growing The Builders, which is a innovation facilitation company that finds and curates some of the most amazing technology ventures out of Israel and connects them with large enterprises, Fortune 500s, to really help them with competitive advantage and to do things that they clearly might not be able to do themselves with their own technology team. So Gabby, welcome.
Thank you. Really excited to be here. I've heard so much about the podcast and I always dreamt about the day you'll invite me. So I'm happy we made it finally.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you on. So give us a little bit more of the origin story. I mean, I gave that summary, but I think there's a lot more depth and meat to that story. So tell us a little bit more.
So the Builders, I can tell you my origin story started, I think I was 13 when I started my first business, and I was doing gardening and I was selling toys and doing all kind of stuff as an entrepreneur. I think by age 17, I was importing TV equipment and all kind of stuff, selling it. So I think it's in my guts, in my DNA to be in this entrepreneurial world from a very early age. But the Builders we started, it's almost 10 years now. So it's going to be in June, it's going to be 10 years. To helping large corporations figure out what technology needs they have, what problems they have, and how can you solve those problems using startups, technology, mature technology, in a faster way. Basically, one of my favorite quotes is one of the leaders we worked with, and she said, I was expecting my teams to show me, here's my strategy and here are the startups I'm working with, but instead they showed me, here's my strategy and here's how I'm getting there faster using the startups. And that's essentially our goal, to help the corporates we work with to get there faster with things and technologies that they may have not been able to get access to, they may have not been able to know exists, or in some cases the sockets don't fit because the corporate's built for having 11 lawyers on their side, 11 lawyers on the other side, and making sure that all the lawyers get in the maximum protection for each organization. And when you work with a startup, you're going to reduce a little bit your protection. You're going to increase the risk, but you're going to increase the reward also. And the corporates we work with understand that. And I think that's the understand and create a path. They don't say, okay, let's give up our structure and process because we don't want any more protection. But they say, for this specific path, let's find a way where we know it's important enough, the problem we're solving is important enough, the leadership understands why we're doing in this path. There is a curation, there's a way to protect or never protect, reduce risk in other ways, but we understand that we can't have 9 types of insurance, requesting 9 types of insurance from a startup, because just getting that insurance will cost them $50,000 a year, and this contract is maybe even smaller, a pilot maybe even smaller. Or we can't ask them to have very complex and rigid security mechanisms internally if we don't give them data or we don't give them certain types of access to risk. So what we do in this process is help the corporates understand the challenges, help them figure out what internal processes can be done differently for working with startups, then help them find the paths where it's a big enough impact and it's a meaningful need that you're trying to solve. What technology, sometimes technology can't solve it. And we've had corporates people inside corporations come to us and say, this is my problem. So you need to change the way IT is presenting sales data to you. This is not a startup problem. You should talk internally because that's the way to solve it. You can find the solution, but it's not the right thing for your organization. So you have to find the right problem, the right need that actually can be solved by a technology. And then we help find the technologies through a network. We we try to break down every part of this process and rebuild it in a unique way. So the way we find startups, we work with companies like Paramount and Maersk and very large corporations, and everyone wants to work with them. And every startup will want to work with them, and just kind of go out to the main square in Bentonville and say, hey, I have these corporates who want to work, and every startup will be piling up to work with them. So the way we do it, we work very much under the radar. We have about 100 people who have a secret key, and they refer startups to us based on the needs. So they'll get access to the needs of the large corporations, and they'll be able to refer relevant startups based on those needs. And then the corporation, give an example for one of the programs we completed a few months ago, was we had 29 startups referred to answer 5 business needs. The corporation had 400 reviews. We also built our own platform, because one of the other things we found is the engagement internally is a challenge also. How do you engage the people inside, the 20, 30 people who have to look at the startups and engage them in a fun way, in an interesting way, a way they can learn from it? So we built this platform that allows them to have a fun, engaging process. And we had 400 reviews for these 29 startups. They selected 12 they want to meet, and they had kind of in-depth. They selected 2 they want to test, 90-day pilots. 2 of them got within 90 days, and it's good and bad because it's a very quick yes or no. And I think for a startup, that's an amazing value to get a quick no is amazing value, and not to get dragged along. And this year, so last year in the same program, 2 out of 2 didn't move forward, and this year 2 out of 2 turned into multi-year agreements and have been deployed in certain organization. And the value of having everyone's eye on the ball for these 90 days, testing, seeing what works, what's stuck. Okay, wait, we have a problem with something. Let's get the person who can solve that something quickly, so we don't now wait for next meeting in 3 weeks until we figure out why even we had this problem. No one remembers where we started even, and you have to go around. So a lot of it is focus, speed, curation, and a very curated methodology to help both sides work in what matters and not get distracted by the problems that don't matter.
And when you think about, sometimes we think about innovation, we like to categorize it as there's incremental innovation, which can still be super valuable. There can be breakthroughs that really can be that sort of 10x leap. And sometimes there's stuff that's completely disruptive innovation. As you think about that spectrum of possibilities, where do most of the opportunities that you work on fall? Where is it in that spectrum of possibilities?
So I mentioned we're doing this for 10 years. We had 99 startups go through our platform, 233 pilots and 64 license agreements signed between the corporates and the startups. And it's a mix, because the largest focus, we don't use the word innovation almost, we use the word commercialization, because the largest focus is on commercial solutions that can bring value to the corporate they work. They've been tested, maybe they're working for a year, they've been tested with some smaller corporations, but it's a working solution that can bring value immediately. And in many cases, because we don't work in specific verticals, so we won't say we do AI startups or data startups, we look at the business problem. So it could be a warehouse management, cameras to improve picking accuracy inside the warehouse. And if we look at the problem can be big enough to be, if you solve this in a smart way, it can be a disruptive value, but it doesn't have to be disruptive technology. You have computer vision, it has to be a really good technology, it has to be fast, best, etc., but it doesn't have to be something quantum that has never been seen before, because in the corporations, they don't really care if this is like breakthrough technology. They care if it's breakthrough business value. Right. And if you're able to impact the business in a meaningful way, that's how they'll measure it, and that's how we'll measure it also. So we don't look so much at we've done in the past, by the way, everything we've shied away from 10 years. Let's look at something that will bring value in 10 years, because the corporations change, the people change. Rarely, if the person who chose has a problem 10 years later is still in the same role, it's a surprise usually inside organizations. And then every 3-4 years, someone who comes and says, wait, I have different 10-year goals. But we do use a 10 and 5-year horizons to set a path and set a course and on success. So we're looking at a company that we can use in 1 year, 2 years, and what would look like, what impact will it be if this is successful 5 years later inside the organization.
how much time do you spend through the program on bridging the sort of the cultural differences and making sure that the ventures, the Israeli ventures, understand what the culture of the enterprise is like and how they buy, and talk a little bit about that process of making sure that there's good alignment and preparedness on the part of the venture with what the enterprise, how they do what they do.
So it's a very good point, because there's interesting research that in many cases the corporates, the startups can't sell to corporates, or corporates don't buy because the startup is not selling in the way that corporate wants to buy it. And that's in many cases the startup doesn't understand the way the corporate talks about themselves. How do you even describe a business unit? How do you describe your internal goals? How do you talk about customers versus shoppers? How do you talk about viewers? Even understanding the different nuances of terminology can change the way you're communicating inside the organization and how you're talking to the organization. In many cases, startups don't understand hierarchy of the corporate, and they don't understand what are the problems you're solving for this person. So you're saying, I want to solve a problem for this organization. And in many cases, we know these organizations as consumers, and we know them as big brands. You think you know what their problems are. Because, hey, I've watched a movie on streaming on Paramount Plus. I know what their problems are. Or I've watched their movies. Probably their problems are very much studio related, and they really want to improve only their cameras, all the features. But suddenly you understand there's an organization there with huge IT organization, and a lot of value in totally different topics. So sometimes the startups don't understand, don't think about what is a problem the specific person I'm talking to. One of our partners is a very smart guy who said once, he told the startups, I don't care about your pitch. I said, what do you mean? Like, we came here to talk to you. I said, no, I care about my pitch. If you can hear my pitch and repeat it to me, where my future is impossible without you, that's what I want to know. And if you can't, then I don't care. So the startups, in many cases, the first thing they'll do, they'll come in and they'll pitch.
Right.
And you lose so much value. You know this more than me. And you lose so much value.
No, that's really good. And by the same token, you know, and it's you called your one of your original programs, even though the company name is Builders, you called it the Bridge. And when I think about a bridge, I think about the fact that there's also got to be coaching at times on the enterprise side to get them to engage adequately, to get them to just not squash the life out of the startup as well, because it's easy for the big elephants to step all over something that could have been really good just based on their own girth and their own size. Talk a little bit about that side. I know you've got the Beam platform that helps with the engagement, but talk about kind of how you get the enterprise really ready to take best advantage of the innovation or the business solution coming from the new venture.
So it's interesting. It's almost like there's an enterprise-ready startup, but there should also be a startup-ready enterprise.
Right.
Because I mentioned before a little bit about the processes. So you have the team in procurement who gets it, and they've worked with startups in the past, and they understand why it's different this time. They understand who's interested inside the organization, and how do you make sure they're part of the process all the time. And you don't call them at the end of the end of the engagement and say, "Hey, get an MSA out of this." But they know they get involved as early as possible. Illegal compliance, very important players. That if you're able to bring them in early, you get much more value from the interaction. You get much more chances to succeed. In some cases, it depends on the partner and the program. Some programs we do, we have the procurement, legal, and security come in and meet the startups on day one and talk them through and say, hey, you usually don't hear this. If you succeed, let's talk for an hour. We'll tell you here the 10 most important things you need to know. We've had a startup who had a $700,000 contract with a Fortune 50 company, one of our partners, and they just sent it to the lawyer. The CEO sent it to the lawyer, and the lawyer redlined half of it. And an MSA with a large organization, which if you get like small things changed, and it's a miracle. And he forwarded it to the business person. The business person, I think you made him like, you can't not have insurance. You cannot have liability. This is not something. And the startup said, that's the lawyers. The legal should figure it out. Like, I don't care. And they sent it back, and the legal redlined again. And after 2 iterations like that, the corporate said, this startup is not ready to work with us, because if this is how they approach business with us, they're never going to succeed in the process. And having the corporate being able to say that is also valuable. And
Sure.
I think for us, one of the lessons we learned is setting expectations very early in the process for everyone. So if we
Right.
get the corporate to talk to the startup and share what's happening, but also the internal people, we build a set of workshops which helps the people inside the organizations to think about, get into a CEO mindset of startup CEO, and think about when you have different constraints. So very interesting. We had a leadership team do one of our workshops, and part of the workshop you get into roles of different players in the startup, and interesting to see the finance person taking the marketing role. And suddenly they're allowed to talk about marketing. And in their organization, 20 years, they've never been allowed to talk about marketing. So you're in finance, you just keep in your finance team, and vice versa. And suddenly they get to see this from a different perspective, and get to try things in a different perspective. When they meet the startup, they're in a different place in their mind, because they understand the constraints, and understand the size. So some of it is the methodology and structure, and making sure everyone's focused. Everyone knows what's the first step, what's the next step, what's the timeline, when do you need to make a decision, who's looking at this, what's the impact inside the organization. Second thing is really preparing the individuals and letting people get experience and access to startups. We have another workshop which we call reverse pitching, and entrepreneurs guide the corporate people in telling the story and pitching internally. And once you go on stage, and we've had someone who's, I think he's 25 years of experience in sales inside the organization, amazing guy, and this startup just ripped him apart and told him, hey, this is terrible. I don't understand all this terminology we're using. I've never heard it. I don't even know what these words mean. And the person in the corporate said, you're right. You're right. There's so many things no one would tell me inside the organization. Everyone's always really nice about it, but you're right. I learned so much from this. So just creating those informal interactions where the corporate gets to shaking hands, and hands are a little bit shaky when you go on stage to pitch. It's also part of the individual help setting the mindset of the people internally. And sometimes it's transparency, and that's, I think, maybe we're like a trusted VPN on both sides, and I think that's a lot of our value. And I've had people in the corporate say, listen, I don't trust this startup. They've lied to me once. They messed up. Don't want to work with them again. Don't want to talk to them, and I'm not going to answer any email from them ever again. That's my approach. That's the way I'm going to deal with it from now on. And telling this and the start saying, we exaggerate it. We're going to have it at some point, whatever it is. Being able to be there and tell both sides, here's what's happening, here's why it happened, here's what can be done or can't be done, and to repair the relationship or to do things differently, is in many cases deal savers. And we've had one of our corporate partners said, I don't want to work with us. Okay, why? The business model. I don't like the business model. It doesn't make sense for me. And said, if they change the business model, would you be open to talking? Of course, but why would they change it for me? Would Microsoft change the business model to work with me? This doesn't make sense. They're a vendor. And understanding that you're a third or fourth or fifth customer for this, for sure in this size, first customer in this size, it helps bringing them back to the table and saying, hey, this is the problem. And the startup may say, I don't want to change my business model, never. But they may say, for this opportunity, I might. Just having that conversations brings a lot of value.
That's really good. I want to take a little bit of a step back. I've had connections to Israel through family members for a long time, and I read the book probably more than 10 years ago called Startup Nation, which kind of reignited my interest in the area. I mean, this relatively small country in terms of population, less than 10 million, lots and lots and lots of publicly traded companies have come out of there. In fact, at one point it was estimated on NASDAQ, there were more publicly traded Israeli companies than EU, China, and India combined. That may have changed, but still it's impressive on a per capita basis how much happens. Give a little bit of that and I'm thinking about our audience of corporate innovators, of why they should think about Israel as an innovation partner in general. And for those that don't know, and there may be some that don't, a lot probably do, but give a little bit of your perspective on that because you've been in the middle of it.
So you mentioned Israel's, we like to say that together with China, we're 1.4 billion people, but we only contribute 10 million people to that equation. I think it's US and the NASDAQ number one, China number two, and Israel number three in the amount of companies.
Gotcha.
The NASDAQ. So we're doing pretty well from that perspective. Famous technologies came out. The firewall was invented in Israel. Waze was invented in Israel. Cherry tomatoes, fun fact that not everyone knows, but also Israeli technology. So there's a lot of technology inside our phones, computers. Intel Pentium chip was invented in Israel. Many chipsets afterwards. So a lot of technologies from a very small country. I'm looking at the map behind you, kind of very far away, and the map behind you. But everything in Israel is geared to international. So all the startups, if you go meet a French startup, they most likely have sold in France, and maybe they're selling in Germany. And they have an amazing business because they have tens of millions of people in those two geographies. And Israeli companies, most likely, they're selling in the US and then in Europe. If they end up selling in Israel at some point, it may happen, but they're global from day one. So it helps in the way they do business. It helps in the way they approach business. It helps in the way they approach building their whole tech stack and building their whole regulation. Everything that's done is done to be ready to go global on day one. And the very high amount of startups per capita. I think it's every 1,300 people there's a startup, but that statistic changes all the time. So a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of tech density. So if I want the best product, he's probably maybe half an hour drive from me. And if I want the best CFOs, she's most likely an hour away from me max. Mm-hmm. So and everyone knows everyone to that extent. So it's a very, very quickly, high credibility evaluation. So if I want the best people and I want to find out about them, everything from their kindergarten, what they did in kindergarten, through their elder service, etc., it's pretty easy, and that brings, I think, to higher chance of success when there's higher levels of trust. I'll say one more word about that is that I think Israeli startups, Israeli entrepreneurs have been able to play in very different verticals and very different spaces also. So if it used to be semiconductors and now Lemonade insurance company, a lot of B2C technologies also, and you'll see Israeli technology in pretty much every vertical or every industry.
You know, the authors of the book Startup Nation said that there were some cultural elements that were extremely helpful as well, and that the Talmudic training, the sort of conversation and debate was kind of part of the society. He made the point that the IDF is a very flat structure and there's compulsory service, and that it was challenges were welcome, and that sort of that sort of mindset where you have a flat organization and where there was open dialogue makes this sort of fuel and kind of fabric that makes a good startup successful, because you get really talented people together. They focus on the goal, but they're happy to debate things along the way, and it makes it stronger. It's not extremely hierarchical. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think it's a lot of there's a lot of cultural elements for sure, and being able to challenge everything. And the CEO and the intern have I would say they have the same rights, but they have and a lot of companies, the intern will have it's okay if the intern will go up to the CEO and say something that's wrong in the company in his or her opinion, and it's not unheard of. And right. You see meetings where there's 15 people and everyone, you don't know who's, it's not like, you don't know there's one person who's saying his opinion and then everyone's following in suit. It's everyone has an opinion, and it's okay that they share their opinion, and it's fine to communicate it. So it's expected almost. So I think that's one thing I mentioned, that the talent density is another thing. I think the fact that also the entrepreneurs here are very open to learning all the time, and every opportunity is a learning opportunity, increases chance of success. But it's part of our culture, being curious and being open to learning all the time from everyone, any opportunity, because that's where you see high value. And there's always, for every interaction, whatever you can learn, whatever you can improve, how can I be better? And almost like self-beating ourselves all the time. What can I do better? What can I do better? Is
Sure.
very helpful for building a startup and for being an entrepreneur. And then the hours, it's interesting because we talked about this before about the time difference, etc. I'd say typical Israeli entrepreneur before midnight. So pretty much 3 p.m. to midnight is for calls, and you're connected to in the first hours the East Coast, and then you go to the West Coast. So it's a very very common interaction here that people are from that perspective always on.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, I think it's a compelling story, and it's something that if those that have the innovation task, the commercialization task in large enterprise aren't familiar with the opportunities there, they should certainly take a close look at it. And that's kind of a good segue to this next topic, kind of the final thing that I want to really go into in a bit of depth. As at a mid-size or even a large company that's trying to create a more impactful set of connections to take advantage of startups, international or otherwise, what's some advice to them in terms of how they get ready? How should that enterprise get ready, just like you said, to be a good innovator? I mean, all of these, if you look at kind of the half-life of publicly traded companies, it's as short now as it ever has been because they're getting out-innovated. New products and services are coming on more quickly than what they can do because of their own size. So how can they get ready for what comes next, a large enterprise or a mid-sized enterprise that maybe hasn't had a long history of being particularly innovative or quick to market?
So I'd say it's kind of flip side. It's going back to be curious, and if you're curious about what's out there and how things are looking. I gave a workshop in Japan a few weeks ago, and some of the entrepreneurs have told me that the Japanese corporates are slow and they're not really open and they're not ready to explore. But the American corporates, they're amazing and they're always ready to explore and they're always open. And it's interesting that every corporate we talk to, they say, listen, we're not as fast as the other companies. We're slow and we're complicated. So everyone looks at it and it's almost like a distorted lens that you think it's really hard to perceive where you really are on the innovation curve. And we moved to the term commercialization because that's where we focus on. I think there's in the journey of innovation, there's an exploration and moonshots and the beginning where you want to really conquer the world and figure out what's even out there and help yourself you imagine the future. And we come a little bit later stage of let's get focused business value. So I would say one thing is understanding who are the stakeholders that matter inside the organization for this kind of process and what are their problems. And if you're not solving something that is someone's on someone's plan, someone's bonuses are connected to it, someone's OKRs, then ask yourself why are you solving it and why is it not on their OKRs? And if it is, make sure that person's involved from very early stage, and kind of bringing the right people in the right stage with the right problems is a very very big part of this journey. And touching the people, making sure that there are some people who are going to move you forward in the process inside the corporation. Some people are going to hold you in place. Some people are going to pull you back. So making sure that you have the right internal stakeholder management, internal stakeholder air cover, but also making sure that you're able to bring value to everyone interacting in the process is super super important in this type of engagement. Then the second thing is figuring out what processes do you have internally which will make you unsuccessful if you try to do this. So some of you'll find out in the first startup is going to get a 64-page MSA requiring 9 types of insurance. And I think they're going to say, hey, we don't have any of these things. Do you really need all these things? Or the 40-page InfoSec questionnaire you're going to get. And then you're going to find out that the startups will say, listen, I don't have, we had a startup once who said, listen, I don't think I can work as a corporate. So why? So I don't have cameras in my office. I don't have a safe. They're asking me all these questions. I should have a camera, should have a safe, should have a lock, should have a security guard. I don't have any of these things. What should I do? I'm saying, no. I can't even submit. This is terrible. And So the corporate being able to understand what processes internally are going to be challenging in this process, and then what can you give up and what you can't give up, and say, okay, I have to have indemnity. I have to have my procurement process has to be involved. I want to maybe get a specific person more involved because they're more geared towards startups, but I want to keep it this way. I don't want to do this. I do want to do that. And I think the most important thing is flexibility. Listen, here's what we think we're going to do in this process. We're going to need to evaluate ourselves all the time. We need to get honest feedback from everyone involved in the process and make sure that people we're interacting with are honest and transparent all the time, because that's how we'll improve and iterate about it. People who come with here's our plan, here's a 3-year plan for innovation. I just think it's so hard to be able to predict the internal process and the changes, and every plan has to have a methodology, a basis, a good structure, and then what are we going to change? How are we going to learn? Very, very strong introspection on what went well, what didn't go well, and making sure that people who are in this closed circle are able to share their opinions openly and talk about it. I think that those are kind of key things for success. And the last thing, I'm a little bit biased, but partnerships are super important in this process also. You're going to work with external vendors, external suppliers, external partners, or startups. What can increase your chance of success? What can reduce risk? And who do you need in the room when you're talking to them, when you're interacting with them? How do you make sure this type of partnership works? I see in many cases corporations hire someone who was an entrepreneur or was in a startup, and I think that brings a lot of value. Working with third parties who have experiences who've done this before. For us, it's interesting because sometimes our partners say, your process seems impossible, but I've seen 10 other Fortune 500s doing it, so I don't even know if I believe, and then tell other people, listen, if this company, if Paramount can do it, then we can do it. If Maersk can do it, we can do it. Because one of the first reasons people say, no, say we're too big, we're too slow for this. Say, wait a second. But if they did it, then maybe it's possible. Maybe there's something here that's possible. So even just the kind of belief, the kind of art of possible is something that's gives power to people inside the organization to try things.
No, that's fantastic. So we've been on this morning with Gabby Czertok, the founder and CEO of The Builders. He's given us some great insights around corporate innovation and commercialization and how these bridges can be built. Actually, the program was called The Bridge, between really great, highly curated, high-tech ventures that have specific solutions that might be relevant, and enterprises that are trying to figure out a way to kind of jump the shark and go faster, to get interesting stuff into the market more quickly than they might otherwise. I really appreciate you being on, Gabby. This has been super insightful. I know it'll be great for our audience. And one final thing, where can our listeners find out more about yourself and also The Builders?
Thebuilders.co and LinkedIn is probably the best places to go. I think I got LinkedIn/Gabby. I got one of the first ones. So, but I think, I don't know if we can post the links, but inviting people to thebuilders.co to reach out, and or GabbyC@thebuilders.co. Happy, if anyone has questions, curious about their process, trying to figure out things, happy to help out and kind of be a sounding board. And really, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It was great. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Innovation Junkies podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insights and inspiration from today's conversation. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes featuring leaders in the forefront of innovation, and don't forget to connect with us on social media to continue the conversation. See you next time.